the more and more that you ask questions to people when it comes to their business, you identify that there's answers that they just don't have. You just have to do volume, do the reps, and do the numbers. But then once you get there, it's no longer about volume.
Has it ever made like a big mistake that you didn't catch?
That's how I discovered this, and that's how I discovered I need to check things. When I was going through the outputs, all of the data looked good. But then when I was going through and sending the emails, I noticed something felt off.
Today I'm here with Jean Carlos, who is, as he puts it, a clarity coach. He helps small teams fix their everyday operations, writes about practical decision-making, systems, and using AI at work. Jean, thanks for being here. Did I miss anything?
No, that's a pretty succinct description there. I would agree.
When I first read that you are a clarity coach, personally, it confused me a little bit. Could you maybe elaborate what it means?
Yeah, so I get that a lot, and it's almost I like to leverage that because it's a conversation opener, right? So clarity for me is when you're making the right decision and when you're in the flow of things and you have the momentum to make sure that your operations are going good. There's no hesitation. There's no lack of confidence. There's no, hey, what do I need to do here? It's just boom, decisive, step by step. You know what to do next. So for me, I look at that as you have two different aspects of that. You have that in your personal life and you have that in your business life. And you can lack clarity in either way. Sometimes if you lack clarity in your personal life, it will spill over into your business life. If you lack clarity in your business life, it will spill over into your personal life. So really just plainly put, it's funny. People see it, they're like, clarity coach. I'm confused about what that means. Perfect. Clarity is the opposite of confusion. So, and that's kind of just how it goes. But what it looks like in action is, decision making on the personal side of things, and then successful operations on the business side of things.
Mm-hmm. So you basically help people to not be confused.
Correct.
About their personal life or business life. Do you focus on personal or business or both?
Both.
Okay, so someone would hire you to help them figure out something in their personal life, or perhaps if they're a company, they would hire you to help them figure out business stuff.
Yeah, that's actually how I got into all of this. I got into things from I was a marketing consultant at first, but as I was consulting, CEOs and founders and even just regular executives for companies, I would kind of learn that it was less of a marketing issue and more of a like they just didn't have something clear. And so it kind of became something to where I would help people with their business challenges, but it was more of like an internal disconnect. And so that's how it all started, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I can relate to that myself a little bit because, when you start doing something, you kind of just start trying it out. But after a while, you probably should put in some plan of what you actually want to do, where you want to head with things, what steps you want to take to get there. When someone hires you, what's the first thing you do?
A candid conversation. I actually have an onboarding call with somebody in about 5 hours, and we're probably going to spend more time with me asking them, run me through your ideal week. How does it go? And then as you're going about your week, what is the typical challenge that you run into? And what I do is I dial into what these challenges are. And I like to hear about how they experience the challenge, what they do with the challenge, what they've tried before, what works, what doesn't work. And I like to understand everything about what a person is experiencing from their point of view. When they say, walk a mile in somebody's shoes, I try to do exactly that. So that's the first thing that I do with anybody. I have zero answers for you right now. One of my favorite metaphors is I'm not going to tell you where to put your furniture in your house without me knowing the layout. So,
Gotcha. And what's the problem that you find most often when you are trying to fix some process, or when you are trying to help the person not be confused? What's the thing that's most often wrong?
So I would just to make it really clear on the business side of things, it's usually two different issues. Either one, things aren't, high level mapped out properly. So I think of it like a restaurant, right? Yes, we cook food and we deliver it to the customer, and that's kind of like the basis of what's happening. But sometimes it'll be like, well, how does this particular ingredient get handled? And a lot of times it's like, oh, well, we just we just do it. And it's like, no, 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 but how is it handled? And the more and more that you ask questions for to people with when it comes to their business, you identify that there's answers that they just don't have. And in my experience, what that means is that there's a lack of documentation over processes. And so there's that side of things. And if the company doesn't have those processes documented, then what is typically happening is that one individual or even a team of individuals have those processes and they have that knowledge, but it's in their heads. And then if they leave the company, nobody knows what to do, or nobody knows how to duplicate that success that we once had before. So I find that those are the two kind of pinnacle issues, and they're really just two sides of the same coin. It's not clear on what we do to make happen what we want to happen.
Gotcha. I There's a very similar situation I know from. I'm a big space fan. I love rockets. I love companies that build
Okay.
rockets. And there is this famous thing, right? There is a Saturn V, which is the rocket that took people to the moon.
Okay.
And that rocket had like five huge engines. I think it was five, but really huge engines which powered the whole thing. And back in the day, the engineers who were building those engines were the only ones who actually had the knowledge how to build them. So after they left, no one knew how to build the engines again, and they had to invent completely new ones for the rockets that are going on right now. They are using completely different stuff for many reasons, but also because of the reasons that they don't actually know how it was made. So
Right.
that's kind of what you do, right? You are trying to take the knowledge of the people in the company and trying to like put it down on the paper.
No, that's a fantastic, I didn't know about that example, but that's literally exactly what I do because I
Yeah.
see it all the time, especially when it comes to, your department heads. If you have a head of marketing and they decide to leave, that's actually usually where it comes down to. And any head of a specialized department, right? It's like when that person leaves, they have the secret sauce. Like if you don't package that sauce, you're going to have to either reverse engineer what they did, or you're going to have to find somebody else that can hopefully make the secret sauce taste the same way. And
Yeah.
that's just always a challenge.
Do those people come to you before it happens sometimes, or is it always like after?
It's never before. I try to, I do a lot of cold calling. I do DMs and stuff like that, and I try to identify individuals where there might be an opportunity for alignment,
Mhm.
and I try to solicit them basically, right? And so the problem there though is that you know it's hard for somebody to realize that they have an issue if they haven't had the issue. You know what I mean? So it's
Mhm.
like it's one of those situations where you build relationships, you develop trust with people. I work with a lot of contractors, so a plumber who's been doing business for 10 years and has been doing perfectly fine, they're good, right? They don't realize though that you know say 50% of the challenges that they've had over the years aren't just an occupational hazard or something like that, but it's like no, you could have eliminated that with a process.
Yeah.
So it is definitely always after the fact, unfortunately, but I'm trying to figure out ways around that.
Hmm. Maybe I know this might be a little bit like tough to come up with on the spot, but do you have an example of some company or some person who you were helping and you figure out some process that helped them?
Yeah, so I actually made a post about this the other day. It was actually almost how I got into all of this. It was a restaurant. Um, and when I first started doing they just wanted me to do posting for them at the time. And I started doing all of that, and it was fine. And then I would ask them questions and be like, hey, how do we determine the budget? And, how can we do this campaign over here? Or, how do you feel about this? And at every question I would ask, there was never really an actual answer, or they just didn't really know. Or even worse, I would ask a simple question like, hey, this campaign over here, did you want to put 500 or 1,000? And it would be like, we'll get back to you in a week on that. And it's like, what takes a week to identify, I'm just asking about budget here. You know what I mean? Like, so that was one of the first situations where I was brought in to kind of fix the marketing, so to speak. And it's not fixing the marketing. It's just that there is no marketing and there's no way of thinking about things. So realistically speaking, that was one of the easiest things that I had done. And it helped me kind of create a lot of the stuff that I do now because it was just documentation. They were a company that had been around for 50 years and they had just never really inventoried the value that they had as an establishment And then with that, once you have the documentation of the amenities that you offer to your customers, it's just communicating the value. It's just that simple. That's all marketing is at the end of the day. So that was actually my first situation, and what kind of led me to leave marketing and go more into operations.
Gotcha. And when you approach a company like this, is it ever like just because the people in the company are not able to do it, to perhaps look at their what they are doing and realize that things are going wrong? Is it? Do you think it's because the people are not good at it, or perhaps that because the company is like going for so long that even though the people are good and maybe they like did it initially, over time they just stopped?
It's three things. Usually, either they don't have the people that have the right knowledge. They've been around for a long time, so they're like, oh, well, we've done it like this, that, and the other. Things change though, so you have to be able to ebb and flow. Um, and then it's that they grow into a place where what used to work just doesn't work anymore. How you got there is not how you get from there. um, and I find that that's kind of the more challenging one, actually, because a lot of people will say, well, this is how we got here, this is how we made $10 million. I don't understand how we're not able to get to $20 million. And it's like, well, it's just a different path.
Yeah, this is like also something that I can totally relate to myself. And when you are trying to reach a certain revenue goal, for example, you are trying to use some certain tactics that work for that target, but once you want to go further, suddenly those tactics no longer work, and you perhaps have to switch to something completely different. um,
It's volume versus value, right? Like
mhm,
as everything that you do to, let's keep it simple, everything you do to get to $1 million is all volume, right? That's just, you just have to do volume, do the reps and do the numbers. But then once you get there, it's no longer about volume, because the more volume you put in as you're scaling, you take away value from your inputs, because at that point you're just focused on output. So you get to a certain point in volume of input that you have to switch it, and you now have to focus on volume of output. Once you get to that point though, volume of input does not equate to volume of output. It's a very interesting phenomenon, but it comes down to the value of things. Just like I can make 500 burgers in an hour, but they're going to be McDonald's burgers. However, if I take my time and craft you something, I can make you five magnificent burgers that you'll be dreaming about for the rest of your life.
mhm, gotcha. And do you like employ those strategies for different people, different companies? Do you perhaps sometimes focus on volume and sometimes you switch to value?
Oh yeah. Yeah, everybody has a different situation.
Mhm.
I work with companies of all sizes. I've worked with a few billion-dollar corporations. Just with their leadership and whatnot, I've never had the opportunity to work directly for these tech giants. So, but yeah, there's different levels of scale. I would almost put it into four different categories, right? Just to kind of keep it simple. You have your pre-volume, right? So like you're trying to figure out, what do we even put volume behind, right? And then you are at volume and you're trying to increase the reps. You're trying to understand, how do we do, we're able to do five, how do we do 10? Okay, we're able to do 10, how do we do 20? But then you get to that flip, and it's less about volume and now it's more about value. How do we get the most out of the five that we want to do? Because that's the thing too, when you're doing whatever the action is, 5, 10, 20 to begin with and grow, it's just based off of getting the volume. But then to switch back to, let's focus on the five, it's more about making it more valuable. That's the scalability of things.
Mhm.
Once you get past scalability and you have scalability solved, now it's about preservation. You have to preserve the systems that you've created and protect it. And that comes down to things like company culture, great hiring, and great documentation. You can hire a great person, but especially at that level, this level four, so to speak, if you hire a great person and there's systems in place that aren't exactly great themselves, you might lose that great person because there's not a synergy, and they kind of expected better. You know what I mean?
Mhm. You're like narrowing it down fairly fairly a lot. I feel like, which personally I think is good. But if you look at the internet, for example, YouTube, there's a ton of videos that are trying to learn you about all this stuff that you talk about, but a lot of them are like very general. What do you think about those? Do you think that they are still beneficial? Is it beneficial to watch them, or would you try and avoid them because you're at that point when you're watching those, you often don't know if they are targeted at you or if it's a person who is like in a different level. You need to like really recognize where you are at. Do you think these are still beneficial, or would you like recommend people to maybe try and go one on one with someone, discuss it with them directly?
It really depends on you, right? So and this is a sales thing, but you can you can fix your car, right? You can probably fix your car. You can go watch a few YouTube videos. You can get the schematics for the vehicle and understand, how it's all put together. It's not a secret, most of the time. You can go buy the tools, and then you can, find a space to get under the car and do all of the stuff. And then you can grab all the equipment to make sure that you're doing it the right way. Your gloves, you might need some kind of lubricant, or, whatever the case may be. And then, of course, you've got to set aside the time to be able to put everything back together. And then, maybe watch a few videos to make sure that you did that right. And then when you're done, you can test drive it and hope and pray that you did everything right and that everything's cool and that your car didn't break. Or you can just take it to the mechanic, because that guy just knows what to do. So it really just depends on what kind of situation that you're in. Can you afford to do all of those things? Or would it just be more beneficial for you to go to the person that can take care of it for you? And can you afford that? So it really just depends on the person. Obviously, money is always kind of a concept for people. Bringing it back to what we're talking about here, let's say operations, right? I get a lot of people, especially landscapers. They're probably the best example here. They're like, all we do is cut grass, and we trim lawns, and we do this, that, and the other. Like, it can't be that difficult. And it's like, okay, but are you the number one company in the world then? You know what I mean? Like, there's levels of reality that we have to approach for ourselves, where, yes, you could just continue doing what you're doing, and you could try to teach yourself, and you could try to learn, but you're always going to be spending time doing what you're already doing, and that won't allow you to take the time to get better at the things that you're not doing. It's just a binary relationship with time. And I'll leave it as simple as that. So it's up to people, depending on your situation, though.
Hmm. How do you try to how do you do outreach to people that need these kinds of services? Do you try to contact them directly? Do you perhaps do some sort of content online, like we just talked about, some YouTube videos, stuff like that? A lot of people do it.
Yeah, I'm big on direct. I do have a little bit of passive lead system, but it's not that doesn't really get me quality leads. So I'm a little bit more direct. Also, I like to work on what's interesting to me. So I'll typically reach out to somebody, but it's really about forming a relationship first. I have a call with somebody tomorrow. I have no idea what their operations are like. I just know that they do window cleaning. That's an interesting situation. I know that their overhead is probably low. They've got to pay for chemicals, and the I mean, that's kind of it, right? The chemicals and the stuff you wear to protect yourself. But past that, like, their overhead is client acquisition, travel, stuff like that. But they have a really simple business. But I have no idea what problem they might have. So it's really just I reach out to individuals, have candid conversations, and identify, can I help you or not? A lot of times I can't. There and sometimes it's that I can, but I've learned over time to recognize when people are not ready to make a change. And that's something that you have to definitely know as a consultant. You don't want to take on clients that, after 90 days of work, they're still going to do the same thing that they were doing before they hired you. Because that doesn't look good on you either.
Mm-hmm. How often does that happen to you? How often do you find a client and find yourself refusing that client?
Ever since I had a child, never.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, I just don't work with clients like that anymore. The clients that I work with now, it's an extremely vetted process. We talk very many times. I try to get some kind of preliminary insight into their business beforehand, and get on paper some sort of, and a set, not just one problem, but a set of articulated problems that I can then confidently say, I can solve that for you. Because any work that I do now is taking away time from my son and my wife. And it's a very binary situation for me there.
Gotcha. So there's probably a lot of like researching and trying to gather informations, right? I know that you talk a lot about AI and automation stuff like that on social media. Uh, how does that does AI help you at all with it? With it, do you do like some?
1000%.
Yep.
1000%. So one of the things that I do for lead sourcing is, especially when it comes to cold calling, is I look at about 10 cities at a time. And I'll try to look at, what I consider second tier cities. So it's not, I'm in the United States. I don't try to focus on New York City. I don't try to focus on Miami, Florida. I don't try to focus on, Los Angeles. I focus on things like, maybe Denver, Colorado, or, Houston, Texas, less Austin, more Dallas, Texas, Tampa, Florida, places like that, to where the saturation in terms of them being contacted is less, but also the business saturation. In New York City, I'm sure that there's 1,000 plumbers. The likelihood that I'm going to find the 10 that actually are going to want my help is a lot lower than if I focus on an area that has maybe 50 plumbers, and I find the five that probably need the help. So it's definitely good for that. And then getting all the information, I usually have AI go through all their website, their Google reviews, things like that. Reviews are great because you get to hear specifically from the customer, like, hey, here's the negative experience that I had, or 4 stars, this was amazing, but I wish XYZ. So yeah, I have AI do all of that. I typically spend 1 or 2 days per week reviewing everything that AI delivers to me, and then I make action from there.
What AI or what programs do you use for that? I tend to do very similar things like you. Like I just let AI research something, but I usually just honestly dump it into ChatGPT, and that's like good enough for me. I turn on like the hard thinking mode. It goes on for 5 minutes, spits out something fairly good. But I feel like there might be much better workflows out there that I just have not discovered.
Yeah, so ChatGPT, the reality of the situation is that unless you're paying for the 200, which I've never wanted to, um, you're going to get what $20 a month will get you. In terms of the regular models, like the thinking modes and all that, that works. That's good. I think that there's just a reality that, you know, they have to change the weights consistently, constantly, to ensure that output is quality for everybody that's using it. And I think it's like a billion users a week now or something crazy. So I find that the quality is just not as consistent. Now the agent mode on ChatGPT, it's okay. It's decent. Um, Still running into the same issue though. If you really, really want like incredible output from ChatGPT's agent, they give you 40 runs with the agent.
Yep.
It's still $20 a month. So you kind of just run into that bottleneck there. Grok is a little bit better. Um, it's just more neutral. It'll work a little harder, I guess. But it's still kind of the same vibe. I pay for premium, and so like I think I get charged like $50 a month. So I'm gonna get what $50 a month gets me. Credit-based AIs typically work a little bit better. Manus is one of my favorites. I have not written a document by hand in, I think, over a year at this point, because I let Manus do all of that for me. I just, at this point, I refuse to do it. Why would I write a document? I can tell it what it needs to do and I can edit it after the fact. Good enough for me. Flowwith is another one, my favorite. Um, the infinite context, man. That's a massive weapon to leverage there. But yeah, Manus and Flowwith are better because they can run a lot better, and because they're credit based instead of token based.
hmm I'll make sure to check out both of them because I have not used either. And I feel like there's still like big gains to have with this. And like you
Oh yeah,
said, ChatGPT is like for everyone, right? So even sometimes what happens, my dad uses it also. What happens? A new update comes in, which I really like. I'm super happy with it. The AI suddenly like has a different style of writing a little bit, and my dad in the meantime is like, "This totally sucks. I hate this." Right? So you can't please everyone, and when you kind of try, you end up in this like neutral ground, right?
yeah.
While more specialized tools like you use can do much better stuff. Are there like still some mistakes in those workflows that happen like very often that you just have to deal with?
Yeah, no, it took a long time to actually get Manus, even Flow with, I love these products, but I'm always candid and transparent with people. Like, they still have issues. Um, you have to be specific about where to get the information. So like every now and then, particularly Manus, whenever I'm having it get me lead information, it may get me um, duplicate emails for like a similarly named company. And so when I do the investigation to understand why it made the mistake, it's typically because it got that lead from an aggregated website. So it'll be like find your contractor here, whatever, yada yada. And so then it just gets confused basically. So what I've learned is to tell it like, hey, I want you to go through, state licensing, and I want you to go through the Chamber of Commerce for this area, and I want you to verify against the Google My Business account and then see if they have a Yelp listing, just more checks and balances basically. That way it doesn't just do what you asked, because that's the thing about AI. It will do what you asked. And when it perceives that it completed the task is done.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, has it ever made like a big mistake that you didn't catch and that came up like coming back to you?
That's how I discovered this, and that's how I discovered I need to check things. And it wasn't that big of a deal, but like actually, so for example, recently I had it batch me 200 leads, and when I was going through the output, and all of the data looked good. But then when I was going through and sending the emails, I noticed something felt off. And then whenever I would kind of verify a piece of information, it didn't match the company. And when I looked into it, it was because there was something similar about that particular company that was also closely related to another, and it just got confused. So it's interesting because AI, it's smart, right? But like again, I feel like there's just a reality where like once it believes that it's completed with step two, it's gonna move on to step three. And if step
Mhm.
two is wrong, then step three, four, and five are going to be skewed in the value. So and then every now and then just a really simple one, I'll go to send an email and the email address won't even be real. And I'm like, hello, what are we doing here?
Mhm. Gotcha, gotcha. Uh, for me, for example, I'm a designer, right?
Mhm.
One thing that I'm still missing from AI is like being able to review designs like in detail. It can see images, but it can't really like actually connect to the design apps and go, for example, through like 50 different frames that connect to each other and create some sort of flow in the app. What I would want it to do is like go through those flows and look at the client brief and tell me if I've done it right, if I missed anything, if there are like some flows missing, stuff that I just didn't see. Is there for you like some perfect thing that you wanted to do, very advanced thing that is still not able to do?
Excuse me.
For example, replace your workflows.
Honestly, I have AI do a lot. I'm more of an editor at this point. Um,
Mhm.
I think just when it comes to really complex problems, where AI knows how to obviously solve complex problems and get you solutions. I think in situations where there's multiple complex problems in place, it's not able to properly put a box around things just yet. And I think that's just because it's still looking at things from an information level only. So it doesn't, let me make this tangible. Sometimes it'll suggest for me to, for a particular problem for like a home service business, to where it's something that would completely change the business model, or it's something that would require the the business owner to spend far more time than is realistic for them. So like, and the reality is because AI just knows that, well, it's possible. So things are just not exactly the most realistic when it comes to complex problems and the solutions that it'll present, because we're working with human beings. So I think that's really the only problem I run into, where sometimes it'll have like this fantastic solution for something, and I'm like, that's not going to fly.
Mhm.
But the beauty is that I can now take that, and I have the skill set and I have the insight to be able to take that and run with it, and I can at least extract the value out of it. So basically, AI can't solve all of our problems just yet. We still have to, use our critical thinking and synthesize what it gives us.
Do you think when this sort of issue is solved or much closer to solving, that your job could pretty much be replaced? Because, for example, in design, I know that eventually AI could definitely replace me, but there is still like this thing between the communication, right? Me communicating with the client, trying to understand what they want, maybe pushing them back on things. So in design, that's something like the AI cannot do, and I think for a while won't be able to do, or the clients won't be willing to work with it. How do you think that would work in your profession?
AI doesn't solve human nature. So people will always be insecure about something or another. Um, let's say you put the world's most powerful AI into everybody's hands. What are some people going to do with that? Some people, just a really basic example, we see some of the prompting that people do, and it's like, make it better. Like, that's not a prompt. That's not, that's barely even interacting with the tool at this point. A proper prompt is probably a good few sentences at minimum. I do like almost like 5 paragraphs sometimes. But the bottom line is that people will always have the disconnect of the confidence, the insecurity. And then it's not even about that. They might have the confidence over the initial application of a solution, but then, kind of going back to the examples of volume versus value, if you're on the journey to 1 million in revenue, then once you get there, you just don't know what to do after the fact. And AI can only help so much with that. Like, I'd be very, very surprised if somebody was able to go from 0 to 10 million with zero external guidance whatsoever, just purely using an AI. It wouldn't be realistic, because it's just human nature elements.
Yeah, I actually tried to experiment with this, where I tried to let AI run my socials for a week, like completely give it control over the content. I would still write the content myself because AI is not great at generating like authentic content, but I wanted it to like suggest what I should write about, like research topics that could be trendy based on the views it gets. Try to like suggest me stuff, and exactly it like went completely out of the box. It started suggesting like things that would never work for my account, or that obviously like have not worked before, and was not like able to actually give me good advice for that. So that experiment didn't end up lasting a whole week because it just could not do it.
There's things about, you know we're all human, and I love bars, like the example of a bar. If you walk into a bar, and it's in a small city, and there's regulars, the bartender knows half of the people, a lot of the people, they're just there, right? And you're just somebody who comes in, you're AI, right? You're just coming in, and you're going to analyze the information that's available to you, and you're going to synthesize the information that's available to you, and you're going to extract all of the insights that you can with what's available to you. But that's going to be based off of the context window. um, you won't have any insight on the regulars that are not there right now. You won't have any insight on the bartenders that are simply not on shift right now. You won't have any insight on how the bar manager, feels about XYZ activity, or whatever such may be. So there's kind of an expansion on the human nature aspect of things. There's things that we perceive and that we kind of just know person to person that we don't really express. And so there's almost an entire wealth of data that's not available on the internet, except for like in the deep dark corners of conversation, that it's not high level discussed as a collective species. I think of things like manners or etiquette like that. Like, yeah, you can go read about etiquette and how to be like a gentleman and stuff like that. But then there's just unwritten rules, and I think that applies to almost everything.
Hmm. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Do you think that could be solved, like eventually, if AI is able to be more proactive in your conversations, perhaps, like, because right now when you talk to an AI, it's just a chat back and forward, and the AI is not like able to actually ask you anything outside of like what you want it to ask you. So do you think that could be solved eventually by AI being able to like perhaps initiate a chat, or being able to go outside of the scope of the conversation when it like detects that you are maybe not like asking it the right questions?
I think of two different examples so indirect answer, but I think of two different examples here. I think what could solve basically the contextual challenge, or the contextual limitation. There's a cool little tool that came out a little bit ago. It's by Interaction. It's called Pokey, and it's an SMS AI assistant. It connects to your email. I think now they can connect to your calendar as well. And then they have a bunch of integrations that you can add as well. I don't use them, but I know that they're there. And so it will give me text messages based off of my emails and things like that. It shot me a text about this podcast. It was like, hey, don't forget about this. So we do have proactive solutions already, but it's still limited based off of like what context you give it. I think that can always be improved by giving it access to more and more context. That's why I'm very excited about the Flow with browser, because I'm able to give it my X. I'm able to. It has all of my logins at this point, and it has everything now. And so I'll be spending the next week understanding like what can't you do, right, and just kind of testing the limitations. The other example that I wanted to bring up is Neuralink, the by Elon Musk, and whatever else may come out after. I think in the future, and this is just an idea, I have zero idea, but I think in the future we may end up getting people who act as information nodes for some of these human nature elements that we can't, maybe articulate ourselves, or maybe there just isn't enough collective information to be able to derive agreeable insights. But if there was a system to identify like whose brain would be worthy of trusting that data from, I don't know. I see an opportunity there basically. So, Warren Buffett, he's a neutral guy. I feel like not a lot of people don't like the guy. Most people that know about him, they like him. He's one of the greatest investors in the world, whatever. So if he was attached to a Neuralink and we started learning data about the internal side of human nature and how to synthesize information, then that would be an interesting kind of concept. So if we had a system that had 100 or even 1,000 individuals that opted into that system, I could see these things being solved.
Hmm.
Outside of that, I don't know how AI would be able to get what's inside of us. You know what I mean? So, you know, kudos to Elon and whoever's working on that kind of technology. I think it's a little bit scary, but it seems like it might be able to solve some of the grander, issues that we can't with technology alone.
I think those kind of people who actually have valuable information that could be like shared with others, most likely aren't gonna want to actually share it with others through like neural interface or something, because at that point you have like some valuable information that you could sell, right? You can sell it as a service. So why would you just give it away?
I think we're going to start to look at value a little bit differently as time goes on. Right now we value money and obviously the time that it takes to acquire the money, and that's normal because that's the system that we have. I think I like to think in terms of 50 to 100 years at minimum. Um, you know, Now with my son, I always think about, well, how is this going to be when he's 10? So I think in 10, 50, and 100-year horizons. And I just don't think that with the current system, it's not sustainable for us to continue going along this path in the way that we look at currency, and in the way that we, not just currency, but the spectrum of scarcity versus abundance. We can't continue with scarcity for much longer. We have to adopt some sort of abundance at a collective level, because not to be, all doom and gloom, but one of Elon's motivations for wanting to go to Mars and stuff like that is because eventually we're not going to have the resources to actually live on the planet anymore. Will that be like in 500, 1,000 years? Absolutely. That's nowhere. That's not in our lifetime. That's not in our kids' lifetime. Whatever. But it is kind of just like in the back of the mind, like it'll happen though.
Mhm.
So um, using Warren Buffett, when information right now we have all this AI, right? When information is just completely democratized, and then yes, it is just kind of like the difference between, well, we all have this information, what's inside of your head. I think that's almost how you will provide value at that point, because well, everybody else knows this, like it's going to be, well, what does Adam Barta have to say about this? Because the other billion people in this field, we already know all of this. We want to know what 1% you have to offer, because
Mhm.
everybody else knows the 99. Now, in the current space, yeah, sure, that's not going to be realistic, but just later on, I think the dynamics will change basically.
Mhm. That's a super interesting take. I never thought about it like that, honestly. Um, yeah, it's definitely going to be like interesting to see this evolve. I think at this point, like no one can actually predict what is going to happen, how it's going to go, because there's just like so many options, and so things are moving so fast that you like can't know what's going to be next year.
We could go backwards really easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw yesterday, but the robot, it's 1x underscore tech is the
Hmm.
user handle, but it's the 1x robot. We could go backwards really fast. If companies decided that they were going to implement a system to where they would have two robots, a supervisor and then a manager, in place of the humans in all of our different organizational systems, we could go backwards very, very fast, especially if those robots were just powered by AI, which again, going back to it, it's going to gather insights based off of what it can see and what it can understand. So, I think we look at all of this as amazing technology, and it is, but I don't think everything is solved just yet. And I think that also there's bad ways to implement stuff that, we can't control how the next person may utilize this amazing technology, especially where things are still money motivated right now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll see how that evolves. I want to thank you for coming over today, for sharing like many interesting insights with us. I think for many people who are watching this, this is going to be very useful to not like only understand what do you have to perhaps focus on at your business or personal life, or like what to even like take into account when watching content online, stuff like that. So thanks for giving me your time today. I hope you enjoyed it.